decide where you're at. And it may be, you know what, if I'm the sole proprietor, I can sell enough right now to fine tune my operations, and that keeps the business running, and then plan for growth, and then get your operations that's really highly tuned, and then bring on your salesperson and say, okay, I'm ready. I can absorb whatever this salesperson can throw at me.
Hey, and welcome back to Building a Family Business here on Builder Funnel Radio. This is episode 33, and back again this week. I've got Wes and Brooks. How's it going, fellas?
Going great.
Going great. I wish I was 33.
But you're close, right? 43.
At 23
53,
years. Yeah, 56. Yeah, there you go.
56. Close enough.
Yeah.
We'll just round down a little bit. Seems like something you should be able to do this year, with all the other stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I think I should round up. I should be like, I'm a very youthful 86.
There you go. Yeah. Actually, we were watching Jerry Seinfeld stand up on Netflix last night. And I don't know, halfway through, he gets to something where he's talking about age and said he was 65. I'm going, oh, he doesn't look like he's 65. So there you go. You're a youthful 86, Brooks. So
there you go. Surprising.
I never watched any of his stand-up. Is actually he's really good. He's really
good. Yep.
Yeah. I think this one was called 24 Hours to Kill or something like that.
That's a great one. Yeah. That was his latest one. Really good.
Yeah, really good. So anyway, highly recommend that for anybody.
Yeah, he's great. And if you get a chance to see him in person, that's awesome. He's come here to Colorado Springs a number of times. So we've seen him, I think, 3 times now over the years.
Oh, wow.
Great.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, they've got that nice little theater downtown. Is that where you guys went to see?
Right, exactly. Yeah, Performing Arts Center.
Yeah, and I also, we watched a few of the comedians in cars getting coffee, which is definitely different. There's some funny moments, but I think he has to have the right guest for that to work on.
Imagine how hard it is to get the wrong guest, it's like.
Yeah. They're very short though. They're like 18 minutes. So you can tell that if it gets kind of a wrong guess, those are like 4 minutes shorter. He does most of the talking. So, well, today we could riff on comedy probably for a long time, but we were going to dive into something we kind of mentioned, I think 2 weeks ago, this whole concept of kind of the visionary integrator. And as I was thinking about it, that's kind of one piece of it, but a lot of times in business, you kind of think about this separation of sales and operations. And I feel like, at least in my personal experience, it's really tough to run both of those at the same time, just because they're so different and they require, I think, pretty different skill sets too. But I don't know, Brooks, in thinking back on, your different roles that you've played, do you find that, have you run both of those roles at different times, or have you always kind of lived in one of those buckets, either sales and marketing and operations?
Early on, when I started with Wes, Wes had me in a production role as a superintendent. And then I would do production and interact with the sales people. We had we had realtors as salespeople. So the sales process was really handled by somebody else. So really I ended up interacting with the sales people on the production side. And then, at different times during my career, I've been in both, where I've sold, high-end custom houses and then built them.
Sure.
So that does give you kind of a split personality at different times, So I'd say it's pretty challenging to do both.
Yeah.
How about you, Wes? What's been your experience there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've done both. And I think one of the biggest challenges around doing both is, I think we talked about it last time, is this yin and yang sort of thing where you're going, well, I have to produce the work, but I'm selling the work, but I'm concerned about producing the work. So that affects your sales process. Whereas, so sometimes you'll pull back on the sales process, or at least I found myself pulling back on the sales process because I didn't want to get into a situation where I was really having to challenge myself on the production side or be concerned that I was going to be able to produce the work that I was selling. So I think that that can be an issue if you're doing both things, or if you're heavily involved in the production side of it, then you can allow that to kind of knock you off your sales track.
Yeah. So you're basically saying if you're in sales mode and you're picking up some traction there, but then you hit this point where you're going, well, I'm also managing all the operations or the production. And so how am I going to get this done if I sell it? And then does that start to impact your confidence, I guess, on the sales side, or you just,
right? Yeah. I think if you have issues around production, if you've got production issues, and who doesn't have production issues, then that does impact your sales confidence, because you have to say, hey, yeah, we can deliver this and we can do it. And, most of the time you can, but nothing's perfect in this world. So if you can't deliver it 100% of the time, or if there's ever any issues and you let that get into your head, then you'll have trouble closing on the other side, I think.
If you don't have a really good handle on what it takes to produce a unit of product, whether it's you're doing kitchens or bathrooms or full houses, if you don't really know what the manpower it takes, the resources it takes, and the time it takes to do that, it's very hard to slot in, jobs. I mean, some people, they're starting out, they're selling, then they're producing. So they'll sell a job, they'll produce it. When the job's over, they'll go, oh, I better go sell something. And then they'll go sell something, and then they'll produce it. And that's just the sooner you can work through that cycle and get out of that, the easier it will be to grow, if that's one of your goals. I mean, I have some good friends who they sell, and then they produce it, and then they'll sell another and produce it. And that's exactly where they want to be. They make great money doing it. And that's the business model they want to do. So you really have to ask yourself, what business model do you want? We're kind of jumping right in and saying, oh, well, what should you do if you're doing both? And how is it a barrier to growth?
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I guess if you really love the work, then that may be an okay system for you, saying, hey, I just need to sell enough so that I can stay busy actually doing the work. But if your goal is to grow, I mean, I guess you could find somebody else to sell, and you could just keep doing operations. I don't know if you guys have had success with that. That's never worked for me that well.
It's never worked that well for me either. I would agree. Now Brooks may have had some success with it, but I have not personally.
I would much rather hire just a crackerjack salesperson and manage that sales process, and then have a great production team and manage that process. And you just kind of keep them, working together. I think one of the biggest limitations we have as small business owners, if we think, oh, only I can sell or only I can produce, you might as well and if that's what you think, great, then just build your business around that model. As long as you think that only you can do something, that's about the size you'll be until you change that construct for yourself. And if that's important to you or not.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's right, Brooks. You have to decide, once again, what is your goal? Is your goal, that you're into the craft? Is it, do you have a particular size of business that you'd like? Is growth a goal? So I think it comes back to that, what are your goals for the company first, and then building your systems and everything else around that to meet those goals.
So let's say somebody the goal is growth, then Brooks, if we're not taking, likes or dislikes into the equation, like, oh, I like operations or I like sales, have you found that one of those pieces is easier to hire and train first, or doesn't really matter? Like, would you have a recommendation if somebody's kind of managing and doing both, and they're saying, hey, I either need to hire a salesperson or I need to hire somebody in operations? Which direction would you go?
Well, I would always hire a salesperson first, because you need sales to generate run your business. So I would much rather deal with the chaos of holy criminy, we just sold 3 kitchen jobs because the salesperson's so good, than deal with, oh, I've got a whole production operation and I have no sales. So I always go for higher sales first, and I'll deal with the chaos on the other end. I mean, as you're hiring a salesperson, you should, if we went back to the first comment, which is know how long it takes to produce a kitchen, know how long it takes to produce a bathroom, know how long to produce a house, and then you know what you can sell. Hire your salesperson and say, hey, I can produce 1 kitchen a month, or I can produce whatever you can, and then have them sell that. And ideally, you created a lead flow, through your marketing campaigns, and that salesperson has something to do. So I actually would take it even a step back and say, generate your marketing campaign to generate your lead flow, to hire your salesperson first, to then solve your production problems later. And it's not, you're pushing all of those fronts forward at the same time. I think when we did our renovations business, we spent a year building lead flow with you, Spencer, before, back in the beginnings of Builder Funnel, before we even hired a salesperson. So I did the sales until I could afford to hire somebody. Sales first. I don't know, Wes, what you think.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting. Well, I'll flip it around and take the other side of it, which is, I think, you need to have your operations kind of not totally grooved in, but you do have to have your systems in place. And then, especially if you're starting out, you're a sole proprietor, you build your operation systems, then you move over to the sales side, you kind of figure out your sales side, then you hire into sales, and then start to grow that way. So I would look at it that way versus Brooks's way, which is kind of the controlled chaos approach, which is, hey, we've got sales, now let's figure out how we're going to do it.
This is classic both of your personalities, right? Yeah.
Right? I think a lot of it has to do with your personality and your approach. I don't think either one is wrong or right. I think a lot of it's going to come down to what you're comfortable with as a business owner. But just remember, you're going to have to work through both of them.
Oh, absolutely.
At some point to be successful, right? I knew a guy who had a different type of business, but he was a great sales guy, and he was constantly selling and landing deals, and then he was trying to figure out how to deliver after the fact, and it was always chaos. So,
well, and I make it sound very much like, oh, it's all sales, then figure out.
Oh, no, I know. Yeah.
You say too, it'd be like all production, then sales. And I think everybody listening has some form of business that's operating. Right. So they have some production capacity, they have some sales capacity. And if they're trying to move beyond just as a sole proprietor selling and producing, decide where you're at. And it may be, if I'm the sole proprietor, I can sell enough right now to fine tune my operations, and that keeps the business running, and then plan for growth, and then get your operations that's really highly tuned, and then bring on your salesperson and say, okay, I'm ready. I can absorb whatever this salesperson can throw at me. If you're dying for sales, you're not making enough money, you need to get a better volume. Hire the salesperson and, have your operations team teed up like, okay, this is going to be rough, but we'll get through it. And everybody's going to have to really step up to make it through it. And there's going to be a lot of evolution and a lot of change in the next 6 months while we sell and build these projects at a much higher rate.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was just thinking about, what both of you guys said, and I at first thought I was maybe leaning towards what Wes said, but I think it's kind of that combination of personality, like you guys brought up, like maybe where are you stronger, and then maybe your ability to hire and train either one of those. Because I tried to hire and train sales before operations and fell flat on that a few times. Then I tried to fill the operations role, and then I would just have more time to sell, and that worked really well. And so maybe it was a combination of my ability to train one or either of those roles, and I just did better on the operations side and kind of failed on the other side. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Is like ease of trying to fill one of those?
I think it's an interesting question that each business owner has to ask themselves, which is, to what size are you trying to get to accomplish your goals? Because that determines how hard you will work at it. You know, in the
Sure.
case in point, like for our business, we hired one salesperson, and I never went beyond that because I knew I didn't want to go to a size that meant, oh, I should have two or three salespeople, a sales manager. I'm going to have, 40 more employees. I just knew, one salesperson generates enough sales to meet the goal of the size of the business. And so we stopped there. For you, Spence, like you said, you tried both. For your personality, it might just be it's a better fit. You're like, you know what? I'm just going to, spend a lot of time in the sales side of it, and then some on general management. Or you might end up being like, I'm 110% sales. I have a general manager. I have another, because those things tend to be easier to hire for than trying to train a salesperson. We were very fortunate in our hire for our remodeling salesperson. Pretty mature guy. He was happy as a clam to be there, and he just crushed it. But I went through another salesperson before that did not crush it. And,
The opposite of crushing it.
the opposite of crushing
Yeah.
it. So I
But
feel
you
like
stuck with it to figure it out, which I think is big. Like not giving up, because you knew you wanted to fill that role.
we had to, otherwise we're going to go out of business. So that was,
Yeah.
because I sure as heck did not want to sell.
I think even once again, it kind of goes back to your goals too. I mean, if you really think that you're going to sell your business, then you absolutely cannot be the key salesperson.
Absolutely, good point.
As the owner.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no value to that business.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So if you do want to sell, you pretty much got. I mean, you got to do everything. You got to basically remove yourself from everything,
right?
To an extent. Yeah. Yeah. And if that is your goal, then I mean, based on what I'm hearing and my personal experience too, you got to kind of keep trying to fill those roles. And if you strike out, just know that you're taking a positive step in learning what didn't work to try to get to that person. And Brooks, you hit them on number 2, which is awesome, but it may take more than that to find that right person.
Yeah, and I think it really goes back. A lot of these questions we talk about on the show are, you really have to go back to what is your ultimate end goal. Where are you trying to get to, and that drives where you're going to spend your time and energy. If your business is a way for you to work independently and generate income for your lifestyle and your family, and that's what you want it to do. A lot of these things we're talking about, you don't need to do, because you're able to. This is a good living. I enjoy doing what I'm doing, and when I'm done working, I'll hit my 401k and Social Security, and I'm good. If you're trying to use it to do other things, you're trying to build a business to pass on to your kids, or you're trying to create, be high net worth or something, then that business is doing different things, and you have to do different things. So I think you got to go back to that original question. As we all flail around trying to figure out what we're doing,
Yeah. Do we ever figure that out? Do you ever figure out what we're trying to do? Or is that just a lifelong?
I just keep
No,
doing
that's
something.
too much of an existential question, Spencer.
Yeah. Sorry. It made me think of, I don't know. I follow Gary Vaynerchuk a lot, and he always talks about, it's like all the parents always say, like, hey, you got to go to college. You got to figure out what your career is. And he's like, most of them don't know what they want to do. So it just made me.
They're hopeful their kids will get it figured out.
Right. You figure it out.
That's really it. I mean, we could go down the rabbit hole on this one. It's just kind of I've never spent a lot of time trying to figure out what I wanted to do. When people say, well, what do I just do it? So it's hard for me to understand that, question.
Kind of the purpose question, or
yeah.
It's
not something I really.
I think probably just because I feel like our generation maybe didn't spend a lot of time navel gazing.
Yeah.
Just because you're like, well, I need to get a job, I need to make some money, got a family to support, would like to buy a house, and you just start rolling, and then maybe later, 15 years later, you start to think about some of that stuff. But I feel like folks coming out of college, spend more time thinking about that. And maybe back in the 60s, people thought about it. Who knows?
Yeah, there could be, yeah, the greatest generation. They came out, went to war, and it's like, that's what we're doing, and so there wasn't a lot of time for that. It's like, holy crap, I hope I don't get killed. And you think about it, World War II was quickly followed by Korea,
Right.
and a little bit longer Vietnam. So there's depending where you were in those generations. Some guys, some friends of mine, their parents were in World War II and Korea.
Right.
Kidding me? Yeah, both.
Yeah, that changes the perspective just a little bit.
Yeah, you get back to two of those deals, you're like, holy Toledo. Yeah, not a lot of navel gazing. It's like, I'm alive.
Yeah. Basically, anything will be awesome because I'm still here.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Perspective is a powerful thing, that's for sure. Well, maybe this is a good segue from this rabbit trail into.
Sorry about that.
No, this is good. I think it goes back to what your point was, which is all of this, that we're talking about. We can give recommendations and guidance and kind of talk about your guys' experience, and I think that gives a lot of context and examples. But at the end of the day, people have to decide where their finish line is, or where their track is that they're trying to be on, and then that will dictate some of these things that you guys are bringing up. So I think it's valid. I don't think we went too far off course, but yeah, I thought it'd be, yeah, look at that. We just circled it back around, and now I'll just do this nice transition into, hey, it's the end of the year. What are your takeaways? I'm curious. I did one last week, solo without you guys on my takeaways. So hopefully you haven't listened to that one, but Wes, I'm curious what, as we've been doing this, 30, yes, this is episode 33, but yeah, anything that's kind of stood out as we've kind of talked through a bunch of different topics?
That, Spencer. I did happen to jot down a few things before this.
Perfect. Yeah, we do actually prep for this a little bit, guys. Yeah, right. It's a little bit, but
a little bit. Yeah. Funny thing is that we've actually hit on some of them. So the first thing I put down is think through your goals for your business. First and foremost. So is it your business and you just want your kids to work there? Or is it a family business that you'd like to see last for at least one more generation? Those are two totally different types of family businesses. And so you need to decide. And so I think that's number one. What are your goals? And then make sure you communicate what your goals are very clearly to all the other affected parties. So that would be your kids and other family members that might be involved in the business. So they understand where you're coming from. And so they're on the same page, and there isn't any extra sturm and drang around all of that. And then I think the last thing is my biggest takeaway is it's complicated. So you got to spend some time on it. It's just not these things just won't happen for you if you're spending 5 minutes thinking about it here and there, as you're running down to Starbucks or whatever it is. So I think Winston Churchill said something like, plans are useless, but planning is everything, priceless. So, the actual plan that you come up with probably will change a million times, but you have to go through that planning process and continue to go through the planning process in order to make headway. And eventually you'll get to where you want to go. So those are my takeaways.
Yeah. I think it's refreshing to just, as we've talked through a bunch of these scenarios, I feel like you guys always kind of arrive at, well, these are some strategies or some methods of thinking through it or planning, but there isn't a magic bullet, and I think, a lot of times we're looking for that. We want, I want that sometimes, and you just recognize that, it's not really out there. You can be more strategic and you can be more effective and you can improve, but it's not like, oh, this is the magical recipe and it's just going to work perfect every time. Which I think goes to what you said is just complicated. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of variables. Brooks, you look like you're pondering something there. You want to chime in?
Yeah, yeah, what Wes said. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah,
No,
ditto.
ditto for me. I mean, I would agree absolutely with what Wes said. Um, Again, I think my biggest takeaway as we've been talking about this is be intentional. You know, with everything you do is just be intentional about these things that Wes was talking about. What is the purpose of my business? Is it for me? Is it to pass on? Be intentional about what you're doing with your business organization. Be intentional about what you're doing if your family's involved or with your family, and try to just continually do that. And I think you end up with a better result because people will recognize, they're like, oh, you know, they're trying, they're thinking about it, they're making an effort, and your family will appreciate that, or your friends will appreciate that. And I think that it's always having intent about what you're doing versus just like, oh man, I'm getting whipsawed around all the time, and you know, it's either the salesperson's fault or the operations person's fault, or it's the customer's fault, or it's the economy's fault, or you know, try to circle that stuff in and drive it whatever direction you want to go. But you have to go back to what Wes's points were, which is, you know, where do you want to go?
Yeah, I like that thought on intention, because I feel like even if, you know, it doesn't go perfect according to plan, which it probably won't, it gives you that sense of purpose, I think, to some degree, to just go, hey, I'm working towards this, and I'm planning and taking, you know, steps. I've thought about the steps, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, and you know, deviate, to go back to your quote, Wes, you know, you change the plans. But yeah, I like that a lot. It's just, if you have that intention, then at least you can feel good about the progress. I feel like no matter how slow it may be, because you know you're at least working towards something you said, hey, I want to work towards. Just as simple as that can, I think, give you some purpose.
I think it's very similar to your, you know, if you have a 401k plan or anything like that, you know, you just have to make a deposit every month or every 2 weeks, and over 40 years, those deposits will add up to something great. And so it's just with your business, you just have to make a deposit every day and making that effort. And over 30, 40 years, it's going to be something that's pretty great.
Yeah, I like it. So Wes, you hit your couple of takeaways there. Brooks, you said intention. Did you have anything else, or were yours similar to what Wes relayed?
Similar to Wes's, so I won't spend time repeating it, but it's just being intentional about what you're doing as you're doing it.
Yeah, I think those are good takeaways. And yeah, I'll have to go back. I already forgot what my takeaways were. See if they're similar to you.
You have different ones. You know. They don't have to all be the same.
Well, I hope that they're different. Yeah, because and I would hope that, you know, people listening had their own takeaways too, because it's very situational and everyone's in kind of a different part of that journey. Well, I guess as we kind of wrap here, we're getting close to the end of the year, getting to the end of this episode. You guys have any final thoughts on just kind of this divide between operations, sales, marketing, kind of back to our original topic of the day? Any parting words of wisdom?
I would go with work on your systems. You know, break out the E-Myth by Gerber. Go back, and if you're feeling like your business is chaotic, or just, you know, it's only you can do everything, you know, read that book again, or read it for the first time, listen to it, and it'll help your business just tenfold just by working on your systems. And, you know, it's amazing how quickly you recognize, oh, this is just, you know, an oral tradition that I pass on and tell someone how to do every single time, versus, oh, here's a system. So I think that's a big one.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I mean, I'll just piggyback on that. I would say invest in making those moves too. I found that when I just said, okay, I need to get out of operations, I'm going to invest in somebody to do that, they actually were a big part of building those systems and improving the systems. So right. Then, you know, that actually removed that from my plate. And that for me, I am moderately detail oriented. So that was a huge help. for my personality wise, and then it actually, got that system done, to your point, Brooks.
Well, it's knowing that you have a need for that in your business, what you have a need for, and being brave enough to hire for it and tell the person, you know what, this is the vision I see. We're not even close to it yet, but I can't do it with what I'm doing. So, but I'm willing to invest the capital in you to go do that work. And I think it sounds like that was your experience, Spencer.
Yeah, and I think it helps, empower that person too. They're like, wow, hey, I'm going to be a critical part of getting to that vision, and they are, because you otherwise the pain threshold, was never high enough for me, where I just sat down and started documenting everything. It always just fell at the bottom of the list. So, yeah.
Well, and you just deal with it as a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the great things.
Just a one-off problem. Yep.
Is this a one-time problem, or are we talking about this every single day, every single week? And then, we better systematize that.
Yeah, that's amazing too. Just I don't know if I'm just inherently lazy or what it is, but you should build the system, and you're like, oh, we've dealt with this 3 times. I should systematize, and you still just couldn't do it. So I don't know what it is, but anyway, we took the step. It worked out well. Wes, how about you? Any final thoughts on today's conversation?
I agree with Brooks, but I think to what you just said, Spence and Brooks, about building systems, systematize, but don't systematize too much. I think maybe you were referring to that, Brooks, right? It's a one-off. You don't build a system around it, because all of a sudden your whole business will just grind to a halt because you've got a system for absolutely everything. So it's got to be a repetitive issue and problem. Then you build a system around it. But if it's not, it's a one-off. Every business has one-offs. And, you kind of build a little bit of a catch system for, it's what happens when something we had totally didn't expect happens. This is how we'll kind of deal with that on the fly. And just have a system for how do we disseminate information and discuss it and come up with a solution and iterate that forward. But yeah, don't build a system for absolutely everything. I've tried that. That really doesn't work.
Yeah, we would always ask that question. Does this require a system, or is it just a one-off? And things that just happen that you're just like, well, that's probably not going to happen again. And a lot of times they just don't, or they might happen 10 years later or something like that.
Right.
If every bathroom you build, they're always asking you, what's the counter selection the day they're installing the counter? That's something that needs a system. It sounds like you need a selection sheet, product selection sheet, right? But what happens if, hey, we're doing a kitchen remodel, and it turns out there's, a cast iron waste pipe right in the middle of this wall. Do you need a system for that? Or is that like, well, we know there's going to be situations like this, and here's how we adapt.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, hey, as we wrap, I'm going to throw something different at you guys. Since we're in the holiday season, we'll wrap with Brooks. What's your favorite holiday tradition that you guys do around this time of year?
Oh, wow. Well, so it's changed because when the kids were little, my kids are all adults now, so they really are not into sitting on the sofa with me and having me read them, the night before Christmas, on Christmas Eve. I've tried to encourage it. There's a lot of support. So that was a tradition we really enjoyed. And kind of as things have evolved, I just really enjoy, getting together with everybody, and when we have a little gift giving under the tree, that's always fun, because it's fun to, to see people open the gifts that you've worked hard to try to get. So I, enjoy that. But really, probably the greatest tradition is just, getting together with friends and family, and it's a special time, so it's always fun.
Yeah, so that's cool. Well, good luck this year getting them to sit on your lap again, but it sounds like that may not happen.
I don't think it's going to go well. Yeah. That's an old tradition that I've had to let go.
Yeah. How about you, Wes?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think my favorite one around Christmas is our Christmas Eve tradition of, we make homemade hamburgers and homemade French fries and homemade milkshakes, and, we eat all that, and then we pick out a movie, and it's usually something that's very Christmas themed, like Die Hard, which you think, what? Die Hard with Bruce Willis. Well, it does happen at Christmas. So, and
If
sit
you
around
Google
watching
it,
that.
Christmas
Yeah.
movies, that's like
Oh, yeah,
always near the
that's,
top.
exactly right.
It
They
must
came
be
up with a
true.
list this year, what movie to watch for around the holidays, and I was suggesting, there was a few in the group suggesting Die Hard, the Christmas.
Yeah. So it's a good one. And so we just, really enjoyed that. At least I did. And just very relaxing and fun. And everyone's there and you're joking around. And it's just a good time.
Yeah. Well, mine was the same as burgers, fries, and shakes was always hey, what are we doing Christmas Eve? Burgers, fries, and shakes, and go watch some Die Hard, and it's always a good time. So, well, hopefully you guys are all in the midst of your favorite holiday traditions as well. And as always, appreciate you guys listening to us here on Building a Family Business, and we will see you next time back here on Builder Funnel Radio.